afternoon's panel discussion. Inclusive leadership is becoming a defining trait of high-performing organizations. Research shows that a greater sense of inclusion can boost team performance by 17% and collaboration by 30%. But what's often missing from the conversation is how inclusion actually shows up in the real world, especially when leaders are under pressure, making fast decisions and navigate increasing complexities. So today's discussion is not just about inclusion matters. It's about how leaders are using inclusive practices to drive innovation, resiliency, and better outcomes. We're also going to be very practical. By the end of the session, you'll walk away with some clear strategies to build more diverse and effective teams, practical ways to address unconscious bias in decision-making, and actionable approaches to create cultures where people can truly contribute and thrive. And importantly, we're going to talk about what happens when inclusion breaks down and what leaders can do differently starting tomorrow. I was going to briefly introduce our panel. However, that's already been done for us. So we're going to go right into diving into our first questions and get our conversation started. We're going to make this a real conversation. I'll guide us, but I encourage all of our panelists to keep our responses concise and build on each other. Jose, let's start with you. What is fundamentally different about leadership today, especially across generations, that makes inclusion essential?
Well, thank you for that question. The way I think that inclusion is really a broad way to look at it because people think that inclusion only talking about diversity, gender, but I see it more broad. I really think that the real leader that wants to do a great impact in their business is not only taking care of people, including them, is hearing them, is understanding them, is being empathetic with them, and trying to bring them as part of the decision making of the company. That's a real way you can make your employees to be inclusive. And not only inside your company, also in the community that you are including. So for me, inclusion is a very broad concept, not only related to diversity. It's more taking care of the people, really taking care of them, and really consider your community where you are located.
Annie, can you pick up from there and tell us what's changed at the level of complexity and cognitive shift and load that leaders are operating under today?
Sure. So if you think about the current environment in which leaders are spending their 24 hours a day, there's a lot of complexity. It's very fast-paced. There's a lot of information that you need to hold over time to make good decisions. And there's a lot of pressure to do it quickly. And so what is different and really important to consider is that leaders have their own cognitive capacities and need to protect those so that they can promote a more inclusive environment. The first thing that happens under pressure is those executive functions tend to fail, and leaders go back to what they know, what is familiar, and make decisions that don't necessarily include the voice of their teams. That is not a culture problem, that's a cognitive problem. And so really being aware as a leader of your own limitations or your own strengths and being able to address that is really important.
That's great. David, would you talk to us about what that means behaviorally?
Well, what's changed is really accountability. And are we accountable? And when we say accountability, is every executive or every leader accountable? But you can't be accountable unless you what? Set the expectations, and the expectations need to be for every leader and everyone underneath that leader. Not everyone can have the same expectations. So accountability goes a long way.
Thank you, Griffin. From a future and systems perspective, how do you see leadership evolving?
Well, I think leaders evolving and changing over time, trying to adapt in certain environments with certain people and their skills, and how you can change on a dime and make sure that you're flexible and that you're willing to change and take in ideas as a leader, and having that change in those thoughts and that thought process with your team and groups from those different backgrounds and diverse perspectives.
Amy, where do you see inclusion breaking down most often, especially under pressure?
So that's the answer, under pressure. And so I just talked about cognitive load and the ways in which leaders today are under pressure, both the time and decision-making pressure, also to get it right. And so there's some risk in that. And so those are the variables that really affect that breakdown around inclusion. As a leader, it's often easier to default to what you think or what you know or what you've done before. And that's the limitation. That's where bias becomes a factor. So it really is the pressure and the leader's ability to navigate that through critical thinking and through their own regulation that can prevent that.
David, can you give us an example of that with your teams?
Well, it all shows up in those small moments, right? Whose ideas actually gets picked up? Is it the same people, the same groups, or under pressure? Our leaders tend to do what? They go back to what they really know.
Jose, what is your take on this?
Well, this is a really important topic because leaders have to understand that if they really embrace inclusivity in their organization, that will make the employees more trustful, they will be more loyal, that you will enhance your work environment. It's going to be a win-win for all the organization.
Maggie, from an execution standpoint, what's your take?
So from an execution standpoint, when inclusion breaks down, the team, the system breaks down. Everything starts falling apart. Team members maybe slowly at first, but start hesitating in participation. They might not say everything as frankly or straightforward as they would otherwise, because they don't feel safe, they don't feel respected, and they don't feel valued at that table. And there's a huge, there's a nuanced difference, between the diversity of checking boxes to make sure we have all these demographics at that table, and what inclusion really is, which is making sure every voice is heard and represented and valued at that table. So whenever any kind of inclusion breaks down, the entire system breaks down.
That's a great place for Griffin to pick up from a system standpoint. What happens over time?
Well, over time, with the systems potentially changing and shifting, and that culture that as a leader you want to create, making sure that everyone from your team, from your leader perspective, and in general, that comes through every ounce of what you do, and making sure that if it does shift or something happens, that you as a leader, make sure that nothing breaks down, and that when you're dealing with a certain situation, that you can adapt and change.
That's awesome. Do any of you have an example that you would like to share? Something from your experience to kind of bring this home before we move on to our next.
I would like to add, in my corporate experience, I developed a career in oil and gas, and you're working abroad in some countries that, you have some cultural difference. So you understand more the culture of the country. and you include the communities into your company, it makes the thing work better because and today I advise in that area. So I always mention you need to put the people to work with you. You need to make that community be part of your business. Maybe as a worker, maybe a pro service provider, whatever. But this is what will make that the people see themselves as part of your business. So this is a way that how you integrate the community as an inclusive way. And of course, the employee is inclusive. So that is a real life example.
That's great. Thanks, Jose. Amy, talk to us about innovation and how what comes from that, integrating different perspectives uh, into driving innovation with inclusion.
Yes, well, the more perspectives, the better. I think we all as leaders know and understand that. Diversity of opinion, diversity of thought, the freedom to disagree really creates the most dynamic teams and yields the best outcomes when it comes to decision making and strategy and also execution. So, innovation is the byproduct or the output of all of those things. And so if you have a breakdown in inclusion and you're dealing with a single perspective or, maybe two perspectives versus 15 that really gives them value, it's very hard to bring innovation to life. It's very hard to execute with on innovation.
Maggie, did you want to add to that on the execution?
I guess as the leader of my team, there's this new line I've come up with that kind of reminds me how to keep inclusivity. And I couldn't have said it better than myself. How important inclusive behaviors in a team are. So I always call it BIAS. Bias, intentional, dissent, example, and slow down. For me, that means whenever I see a bias coming up, whether intrinsic or obvious or accidental, whatever, it's my job to turn down. It's my job to not just look at the loudest voices, but also listen to who am I not hearing from, who are the quieter voices that would offer a different opinion. I have to be intentional in the way that I care about inclusivity. It is foundational and it's core to my team. It's part of our foundation. Dissent is not only allowed, it's encouraged and rewarded. I want to hear what your alternative opinion is. I, as a leader, set the example. That's for me, that's my job. If I do not consciously care about my role in inclusivity, then I've failed as that example. And slow down. I do not slow down easily, but it is my job as a leader to slow down and again ask, who am I not hearing from? What voices am I not hearing? What dissent am I not considering? And all of that, those practices in all allow me to be more effective as a leader, more effective in business, a company does better, so on and so forth.
It's really interesting points I heard Jose talk about community and bringing people in, and I heard both you and Amy talking about the importance of being able to hear dissent. And David, in your work with safety, I'm so curious if you have an example or if you have something you'd like to add, especially about this idea of being open to hearing different opinions.
Well, you have to be open. You have to have an understanding that not everybody is going to tell you what you want to hear. There are sometimes in safety where it's that hard conversation, and you have to have those hard conversations. And if you're not willing to have hard conversations, then my question is, why are you in leadership? Right? And you have to listen to your people, and not only listen, but understand what they're trying to tell you, because there is definitely a gap out there.
Griffin, would you like to add on to that?
Sure. So I think as a leader, in helping with visually impaired and blind individuals and having that sense of community, being able to also just not hear from different opinions and voices and having, open ideas and thoughts and ways of maybe doing things differently because, we did something this way forever, so we're going to keep doing it that way and be open to those different ideas and thoughts, but also as, a leader coming at it from a different perspective because if you can't understand and have that basic level as well, least in my experiences, then you might not be able to fully relate to that individual, that team member, that person, and fully be able to understand how you can help them, how they can help you as a leader as well.
Can I add?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what the common denominator is in everything I've heard and what I talked about was leadership or leaders having the multiple cognitive flexibility. So being able to hold lots of information at once. And also flex into other spaces. So Ruben just talked about being able to hear dissent and be able to incorporate that. That requires a certain level of cognitive flexibility. And if you don't have that as a leader, it's going to be really hard for you to maintain an inclusive position.
Would anybody else like to add anything?
Yeah, I would love to. The other thing that's coming to mind with we have it right now is trusting my team. You know, my team, you know, I brought together for a reason. These individuals all have something to say and something of merit to say, regardless of which diverse demographic they like boxes they may or may not check. Part of that is like I'm not going to be the expert in every single arena. I can't be. That's not human. That's not possible. And that's just not in the cards for me, at least. But I can trust my team. And that's also another part of the inclusivity. Having those hard conversations, like they don't always have to be hard conversations. It's up to me to be open to listening, to hearing that voice and dissent. Like I don't agree with this because of X, Y, Z, and even kowtow to someone who isn't the expert in the arena because I hired them for their expertise in that arena. You know, and trusting your team is such an important part of it. And trusting these people who are surrounding you with the same mission and alignment and goals. You know, that's a huge part of inclusivity that in practice for me personally.
But you have to actually be willing to, again, when you build that trust takes time. And if you surround yourself, as a leader, what are we supposed to do? Surround ourselves with people we can what? Trust, right? Because if we trust those people, that's how you become a great leader, is by surrounding yourself with people who you can depend on, people who have your back, people who understand the mission, but not afraid to tell you that, hey, listen, we're not heading in the right direction, or we're not getting all this information, or we're not really grasping what our employees are trying to tell us.
I want to add something else. Because one of the things that is very common, and it happened during my career, I saw it a lot. When you're in a leader position, every time you climb more into the top, there is a high tendency to isolate yourself. It's very human. And you have your core management team, and you're only hearing them. So you kind of tend to isolate yourself. So a leader has to have that ability to don't lose the contact with the reality, because you can have a lot of yes men around you, and you will feel very happy with them because it's going to be music for your ears. But the truth is, maybe the organization is saying something else, and you need to have the ability to make that connection with the people. I think that's an example. During my career, I always try to walk around the building and talk to the people and see how they were. And sometimes they come to you and tell you some things that was not what they were telling you that you managed to do. So you do know, and you try to deep dive what was going on there. And as far as you have the ability to build that relationship, that trust, they will be more open to come to you and tell you what's going on too.
That's a great example, Jose, and a great place for us to transition because we talk about practical strategies. Anybody want to jump in with a practical strategy, or should I call on somebody?
I'll take one.
Okay.
So one of the practical strategies that I think is really important is actually for the leader themselves, which is to protect your capacity. Recognize that you're under pressure, that you're being asked to make decisions or required to make decisions under pressure, and often that's not your best decision. So creating that culture of inclusivity, not isolation, preventing that bias, maintaining your perspective is critical.
Thank you.
I think, as well, just surrounding yourself with, of course, like-minded individuals that you can bounce ideas off of and help you, achieve your goal as a team, but as the leader, you kind of going off Amy's point a little bit, you need other people around you to help you and not be isolated, but be able to lead in a healthy environment. And that's one thing that I think can be challenging for a lot of people saying, I need the help, I need the support, what can I do to make sure I'm leading in the best way possible with the best practices to have the best outcome, not just for me, but for my team, my company, everyone that I'm accountable for. So I think, having some of those practices as well can definitely, help in many different ways.
Also focusing on behavior. But whose behavior are you focusing on? Everybody else's or yours? Internally, you should look at yourself, right? And then you start looking at the behavior of everybody else. Who are you supporting? Is it the same people all the time? Or are you supporting others? So it's important, that behavior part, and I think we miss out on that. We're dealing with real people, right? We're dealing with human beings, and they have emotions, but are we in touch with that as leaders? Something to think about.
No, to piggyback off of that, I completely agree. It's fostering a culture of inclusivity and harmony was a learned behavior. I had to be very intentional about learning that behavior, learning to be that example. Conscious or unconscious, we all have biases. And that's part of being human. So, to foster that, we have to be intentional. And in creating my company, my business partner and I took, we spoke about at length, what is the culture we want to foster here, and what do we care about most here. And that was very intentional and had to be foundational to our company and culture, is that we care about inclusivity. And that was learned for me. I didn't just make that up. I didn't grow up with that. That was a learned behavior for me. And that's part of leadership as well. It's just, you learn making it up as you go along most of the time. And you all have to learn it.
Great, thank you. So I have one last quick question for everybody. What is one thing leaders should do differently starting tomorrow? Who's that?
Well, the first thing is, everybody here mentioned everything related to that, because the real leader has to be the people from the human side. So treat them like they're real, they're human, and have that human touch to them. Because when you treat the people as real human, then you care, there where the relation starts.
I think the thing we can do tomorrow is protect decision quality under pressure. And I'll give you a concrete example of that. When I started my business, I had the ethic of being available to anyone. It was very open door policy, very inclusive by design. And what that meant was that everybody came to talk to me, which on some level was really great. And on some level meant I didn't get to walk around during the day. People would catch me in the hall. People would catch me going to get something to drink or eat. And so I think when I say protecting decision making under pressure, that's an example. If you're moving all the time and thinking all the time, moving on to the next problem, talking to everybody in your organization, that is draining in a way that makes you much less useful. I own it. Made some not great decisions under that kind of pressure.
Thank you.
I think it's important. What you need to do today is take accountability for your actions. Be responsible. Admit your faults. Again, we're dealing with our employees, and our employees, if you really truly look at it, You're only as good as your employees make you. And if you're not treating your employees with that humanistic touch, with that value, that you truly, truly value them, then where are you at as a leader?
I'm an insatiably curious person by nature, so first and foremost, in learning any endeavor or skill is learn everything you can. What does it actually mean to be inclusive? What does it mean from a leadership perspective? What does it mean in your social groups? What does it mean to care about every voice in the room, not just the loudest ones? You have to learn about. I have to learn about it. Speak for myself. I have to learn about it and learn about everything before I can start employing it. So that's the first thing I could ever do if I wanted to learn to be a municipal leader, is to learn what it means to be included and what it means to be excluded as well.
Griffin.
I think just having that drive and determination to believe in what you're doing, because as you continue in your path and you believe in your mission, your company, whatever you're doing, that will resonate with everyone else, either in the company that can help you, advise you, and lead you forward on your path in your life, in your business, and just in general. So that would be my last point, or just example and thought on the topic.
As a leader, if you protect your people will protect you.
Exactly.
I mean, that's as clear as I can actually say it. I mean, your people are valuable. And until you truly understand the value of your employees, it makes you think, right? How valuable are our employees? They're truly valuable.
That's what I was supposed to do is, we're able to today in crazy world, everybody knows that. And there's a trend to have autocratic leaders in many positions. You see it more frequently. So it's kind of a contradiction with what we're talking about today. Because sometimes autocratic leaders, you do what they say. The same period. And sometimes I think that is here. The real thing is that in around those leaders that's going to be remembered are going to be those that care for people. And those leaders that take care for the human side. There's a lot of leaders in the history that were like that, and one of the biggest leaders was Jesus. So I like to finish with that.
Yeah, I would also add that in addition to being remembered, the type of leadership that you're describing, Jose, builds successful companies, sustainable companies. And without it, we'll probably come up with a list of companies that have failed because they didn't do that. And so sustainability is of your company is really heavily dependent on inclusion.
Thank you. Inclusive leadership is not about intention. It's about how leaders perform under pressure. The organization that will win are the ones that can consistently integrate diverse perspectives into better decisions. That's what drives innovation, resilience, and results. Thank you all for being here. Thank you. Do we have time for Q&A?
Yes.
Can you give me a time on how many minutes we have?
Like 8 minutes.
Perfect. Q&A time. Any questions for our panelists? Thank you. Don't be shy.
Yes, sir. He's come through.
Hi, this is a great discussion. Kudos to you all. I'm Dr. T. Maurice Fowler, and my question is, how does psychological safety impact what we're talking about in inclusion? That's my question.
It's a great question.
So when there's a breakdown in inclusion, first things that tend to happen Are people clam up, as we spoke about earlier? People hesitate to contribute, they may hesitate to give dissent, they may say that may not be, they may not say like that's not a great idea. When there is when there's a psychological breakdown, they don't trust and respect there, or they don't feel trusted, respected, and valued on their team. You know, that from a leadership perspective, from a company standpoint, is detrimental to any execution of any plan you may possibly have. The best functioning teams are the ones who always feel valued. Every member, every voice, every thought, even if it's just a little quick off to the side, someone feeling valued, and that psychological safety, feeling safe to their soul, to their core, is what makes the strongest teams become the strongest teams, the fastest, most efficient, the smarter decisions made more quickly straight out of the game, fewer costly needs to pivot later down the line. If you go on ad infinitum about all the benefits and make sure your team feels psychologically safe to speak however they want to speak.
As a therapist, I'll add, I was new to the definition of psychological safety from a corporate perspective. I think of psychological safety from a human being perspective. And so one of the things I learned early on was to operationally define the psychological safety for your teams. Because, it could mean 10 different things to 10 different people. I was shocked at a meeting one time to hear that psychological safety meant not holding people accountable in public because they felt exposed. And I thought, well, I don't even know what to say to that, that we need to be able to discuss things, and we need to be able to talk about performance, and we need to be able to all be okay and feel supported and psychologically safe to do that. And so it's been an interesting experience combining what I know of human psychological safety and the corporate version of psychological safety. And I think the best answer is, combining those.
Thank you.
Yes.
I have a very specific question, and I hope it doesn't make you uncomfortable. I am in an industry that is failing, and there is no psychological safety, and there is no inclusion. And I'm trying to break that role and very much becoming an outsider in doing so. And my question is, what do you do in circumstances like that based on your experience and knowledge?
Can I take that one? Yes, I've been here. So I worked in an industry that was that there was very little psychological safety, very hierarchical, very power-oriented, non-inclusive. And I had the option to leave or stay in the industry and try to make change. I stayed, attempted to make change, and after about 10 years said, I'm getting nowhere, and my energy is being wasted, and I really believe it's the very important things. And so at that point, I opted to leave, and I sat with myself, and that actually was the beginning of my own business, the creation of my business.
And I think it's really those hard conversations that I talked about earlier. You got to be able to have hard conversations to understand. Psychological safety affects everybody, right? And everything that you do at work. So, if you don't understand it, again, you have to understand the value of the human being. And you have to listen. And you have to take action. Because listening without action is well. Useless.
I also had lean into your HR team. That's a great resource when you're feeling like you have, you're not being heard.
I have a totally different perspective on this, actually, or a totally different avenue. I am the CEO and founder of a company in an industry that, on the whole, I pretty much hate. And that's the industry. There are so many issues within this incredibly old-fashioned, maybe I would say, democratic kind of industry. But I'm in a different position. I'm in a different position, obviously. I then created a product that
I'm the exact same thing. I'm an entrepreneur too.
Okay, so in my company, I think about it constantly. I stay up nights thinking about how do I fix the problems I hate about this industry? How do I fix it in my company from the inside out? Granted, I'm in a different position because I'm the founder and CEO of this company. I get to make those decisions with my team. Uh, but that's how I handle it. That doesn't mean it's how everyone can handle it or wants to handle it. I guess at the end of the day, the best thing to say is to do what's best for you.
You do you, boo.
Exactly.
Thank you.
And I have a question. I mean, really great panel presentation. Obviously, you've all got very diverse backgrounds and experiences, and you're all leaders yourself. I think, Jose, you mentioned one leader that you aspire towards, but I'm just curious as to the panel. Is there a particular leader, either in your industry or outside of your industry, that you maybe aspire towards, or a motivator from? They could be living, they could be no longer living. I'm just curious as to all of your perspectives.
Well, there's a president of Alcoa back in the day when he turned around and made safety the core value of his company. Safety had biggest priority, number one priority. He actually went out to companies giving out his business card, and he was telling people, employees, supervisors, and management, if there's a problem, you call me, and we're going to fix it. Not tomorrow, not the next day, not the day after. We're going to fix it that day. And money is no option. And they became the most profitable company at that time. And I don't understand why more businesses don't follow that.
Mine would be Dr. Paul Farmer. He's unfortunately not still alive. He wrote a book, Mountains Beyond Mountains, which was probably one of the most inspiring books that I read when thinking about starting my own business and the problems that I was trying to solve with my business. He was a physician who practiced primarily in Haiti, and he was responsible for preventing the global infectious disease of drug-resistant TB. And his methods were in the community. And his stories were all about, hiking 50 miles from the jungle, hacking through things to deliver somebody's antibiotics. And I remember reading that and thinking, if Paul Farmer can do it, I can't do it.
Another leader of mine in the United States Air Force Staff Sergeant had, when I was a young man, 17, when I first joined the military, turned around and said, your work is your signature. And I've never forgotten that. So it doesn't matter how long it takes, got to do the work because it's your name.
Thank you. Andrew?
Nelson Mandela actually have a quote of his tattooed on me. I love him so much. He's such an inspiration to me. He says, I never lose. Either I win or I learn. And I win or learn. Literally tattooed on my hat. That's how I live my life. It's how I make every decision. I may not always make the correct decision, but I learned something. As long as I bring something away from it, as long as I learn something, there's no such thing as losing in my life. And win or learn. And that's what has influenced me most.
That's one step.
Yeah, sure. So I think one was he's still living is Eric Weinmeier. He's completely blind. He's just done a lot of epic things in his life, including climbing Mount Everest with no vision. He's written books. He's just given me the opportunity to see what's possible and what you can do with little to no vision. Being diagnosed with a retinal degenerative disease at age 12, how devastating that can be. And I'm just seeing how he carries himself and leads, and just there's no boundary. And going on to write books and speak and starting his own nonprofit and just doing epic adventures, which I think that's the person I would aspire to be, and I'm trying to. And even going bungee jumping in New Zealand and going skydiving, just pushing the limits of what's possible, and getting that baseline from Eric and having that perspective. So I think that Eric would be mine.
Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, I'm gonna close with this. Because I have a group that I will advise that they are heavily trying to promote inclusion in the communities of the businesses. And they need a research that final result of that is that the most profitable companies are those that take care of their employees and take care of their community. So that's the kind of the secret sauce. So that's the one first.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for your questions. I think we're done.
Okay, go ahead.
You guys talk about psychological safety. Something else came up for me, and I was just curious as to what do you think would help address like just psychological safety, like classify peer level competition and backstabbing, and somehow like reinforce ideas for everyone. Because that happens a lot. Is sometimes people think psychological safety just goes backwards, but it's horizontal.
If Pam's okay, and because of our time, can I take this one?
Yeah.
So many years ago, there was a program that I went to where it was about inclusion and specifically about intergenerational. And when we think about our communities, our families, we want to include everyone. And so if you have everyone gather in a circle, the only way you're going to get everybody in is if you take a step back. And by taking a step back, you create space and room for everyone. In order to take a step back, you have to pause, you have to be intentional, you have to pay attention to your surroundings, and then take that step back. No matter how many steps back you have to take to make sure there's enough room for everyone in the circle. And that's what I will recommend.
Yeah, I love that answer. I'm almost going like a servant boost version. Almost like kind of just like yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.